6 women. 1 auction platform. She was the last one standing when the laughter began, rejected by her fated mate. Sold for 2 silver coins, the Highlands of Ravenmoor. A dying pack, a ruthless lord circling stolen land like a wolf circling wounded prey. 90 days until Blackthorn Sol falls. 600 gold he does not have, and an ancient blood debt written into the deed. The Alpha King who bought her never asked her to kneel. He asked if she had eaten. A forge lit for the first time in 5 winters. A hammer sabotaged in the dark. A chimney falling. A herd sold at dawn. Silver rings. A forged deed. The moon rising over a woman the world called worthless. 2 silver bought me everything. The auction hall at Ironhold smelled of stale wine and older shame. Torchlight guttered against gray stone walls that had witnessed this ritual for 300 winters. 6 omegas stood on the raised platform. 6 women rejected by their fated mates. 6 lives waiting to be traded like livestock at a spring market. In the back corner, Alfaking Cormac Blackthorn pressed his shoulder against the cold stone and tried to disappear. 34 winters old. Broad through the chest. Gray already threading the dark hair at his temples. He had led 500 warriors at the Battle of Ravenfield. He had watched his father die beneath the black banners of the Ashen Lord. He had lost his mate Lyanna to a southern lord with soft hands and softer promises. And now here he stood, in a public auction hall. 2 silver coins in his fist. 2 coins. That was all. That was everything. Have you ever stood in a room where the whole world could see how much of you had already been taken? He had not come to bid. He could not bid. Those 2 coins were meant for flour, for the last barrel of grain that would carry him through the coming winter. He had come only to look at human faces one more time before the snows closed the mountain passes and left him alone with the wind and the mournful howl of 38 starving deer beasts. The first omega went for 300 gold. A pretty thing. Blonde, 19 at most. Hands like river stones, smooth, untouched. She smiled when the merchant son raised his hands. Nervous, grateful, Cormac watched her leave the platform and felt the coins in his palm grow heavier. 300 gold. He had not held 300 gold in 8 winters, the second omega. 250. Broad shoulders, steady eyes. A blacksmith's widow from the northern reaches. Bought by a shipwright who looked pleased with his bargain. 3rd. 4th. 5th. Gone. Purchased. Traded. And then the auctioneer cleared his throat, because he had saved her for last. Because he had known. Everyone in the hall had known. Now then, my lords. The auctioneer's voice cracked at the edges. Drunk already at the second bell of the afternoon. We come to our final offering of the day. The laughter began before she even stepped forward. She moved onto the platform the way condemned men walked to the gallows. Slow, deliberate. Head lowered but spine unbroken. Cormac's breath caught for a reason he could not name. 6 feet 2 inches. That was the first thing anyone noticed. Broader across the shoulders than most of the men who had come to buy. Hands that looked like they could bend a horseshoe cold. Dark blonde hair, pulled back so tight it made her face look severe. Angular, carved from northern granite. Her dress hung wrong on her frame, too short in the sleeves. Too tight across the chest. A dress meant for a smaller woman. A dress that had been the only one she could afford. She kept her eyes on the flagstones. Cormac knew that look. He had worn it himself for 3 winters. Freya Steelborn. The auctioneer stumbled over the name. 26 winters. Come to us from the Northlands beyond the frost wall. Rejected by her fated mate before the mating altar. Says she can read. Says she can write. Says she is. He gestured vaguely at her towering frame. Well. My lords, you can see for yourselves what she is. A giant, a voice cackled from the front row. A blessed giant of the Old North. Bought her a dress and it fits like a doll's. How much for the whole of her? A copper a foot? Laughter, rolling, mean. The kind of laughter that had been aimed at Cormac more times than he cared to count in the past 3 winters. The kind that turned a room into a mouth and swallowed you whole. Freya's jaw tightened, but she did not lift her eyes. Did not defend herself, did not flinch. She only stood there, absorbing it. The way a mountain absorbs a storm, something in Cormac's chest cracked open. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. Let us begin. The auctioneer tried. Bids at 100 gold, my lords. She is educated. Strong, she could bear children fit for silence. Not the pleasant silence of consideration. The other kind. The kind that landed like a slap. Somewhere in the back. A hound whined. 75 then. The auctioneer wiped his brow. Come, my lords, she would work a farm herself. Save you the cost of laborers. Nothing. Freya's hands, clasped before her, had gone white at the knuckles. 50. Cormac saw her breathing change. Faster, shallower. The breath of someone trying very hard not to weep in public. He knew that breath. He had breathed it the night Lyanna's letter arrived. The night he read the word divorce and understood that the last soft thing in his life had walked away. 25 gold. The auctioneer's voice had dropped to something close to a whisper. Still nothing. The hall had gone uncomfortable. Even the cruel men shifted in their seats. Because this was no longer sport. This was the public unmaking of a soul. Freya lifted her eyes, just for a moment. Just long enough for Cormac to see what lived inside them. Not defiance. Not even shame. Something worse. Something more familiar. That thin, desperate flicker of hope that someone, anyone, would look at her and see a person instead of a jest. He had seen that flicker in his own reflection every morning for 3 winters. Going once, the auctioneer whispered. Cormac's fingers closed around the 2 silver coins. This is madness. His own voice inside his skull. This is the stupidest thing you could possibly do. You need these coins. You need the flour. You will starve without them. You will freeze. Winter is 6 weeks off, and you have no reserves and no herd worth the name, and no coin. And except he was looking at her, and she was still on her feet, after the journey, after the auction, after a hall full of laughing men. She had not folded. That was not nothing, going twice. But wisdom had gotten him nowhere. Had it. Wisdom had cost him his mate, his dignity, his father's lands. Everything he had ever been careful about, he had lost. Perhaps it was time to try something else. Perhaps it was time to try foolishness. 2 silver coins. His voice cut through the hall like a hunting horn at dawn. Every head turned. The auctioneer's jaw fell open. Somewhere a wine cup slipped from a slack hand and shattered against the flags and stones. And Freya's eyes locked onto his with an expression he could not read. Then the laughter came, roaring, rolling, waves of it that broke against the stone walls and rolled back and broke again. Men doubled at the waist, slapping their thighs, gasping. 2 silver coins. Did the mountain lord say 2 silver coins? 2 silver. For the giant. Cormac Blackthorn has finally lost his mind entirely. Cormac did not hear them, because he was looking at Freya. And she was looking back. And in her eyes he saw the flicker of hope grow bright for one breath before she remembered to smother it. My lord, Blackthorn. The auctioneer had gone the color of raw meat. Surely this is not. She is a woman. A human woman? 2 silver is not. 2 silver. Cormac's voice steady now, iron finding its edge. That is my bid. Is that enough to meet your reserve? Or do I need to find you 2 coppers more? The auctioneer looked at the crowd. At Freya, at his empty coin box, which by law took a commission on every sale, which meant even 2 silver was better than nothing. Which was what he would collect if the woman walked off the platform unclaimed. This is most irregular. So is auctioning human beings. Cormac's voice quiet now. But here we stand. A few of the laughs died in men's throats. Truth did that. Anyone else? The auctioneer scanned the room with the desperation of a drowning man. Any bid at all upon Miss Steelborn? 3 silver. Anyone. The silence that answered was absolute. Sold. The auctioneer's shoulders collapsed. Sold to Alpha King Cormac Blackthorn of the Blackthorn Pack. For the sum of 2 silver coins, a pause. May the Moon Mother have mercy on you both. Cormac walked forward through the parting crowd. Aware of every eye on him. Aware of the whispers already rising like flies around a corpse. He pulled the 2 coins from his pocket, his last 2 coins, and set them down on the coin box with a sound that seemed too loud for such small metal. Up close she was taller than he had thought. Nearly to his shoulder, and Cormac was not a small man. Her eyes, now that he could see them properly, were deep brown flecked with amber, and they held an exhaustion that had settled into her bones, like winter into a barn. She watched him the way a hare watches a hawk. Not afraid, just careful. Assessing, my lady. He touched the brim of his traveling hood. She did not answer. She only watched, my Lord Blackthorn, the auctioneer pushing papers across the makeshift desk. You will need to sign the mating contract. Territorial law binds you both under the... I can read. Cormac scanned the parchment. Standard mating contract, binding under the laws of Ravenmoor, granting Freya Steelborn to him as his lawful mate in exchange for the agreed sum. His stomach turned at the word granting, as if she were a bolt of cloth, but he signed, because what else was there to do? He held out the quill to her. She looked at it as though it might bite. You need to sign as well? His voice softer now. If you are willing? Willing? Her voice, low, accented, cultured in a way that did not belong in this hall. She tasted the word like it was strange fruit. An interesting word for it. You do not have to. He meant it. If you would rather take your chances elsewhere, I will not hold you to this. Elsewhere, a short, bitter laugh. Barely a sound at all. Yes. My many other options. She took the quill. Her hand shook as she signed a neat, precise script. Freya Margaret Steelborn. Then, after a pause that meant something Cormac could not yet decipher, she added Blackthorn to the end. Just like that. She was his mate. The crowd was already thinning out, losing interest now that the sport was done. Cormac heard their words anyway. Speculation about how long she would last. Jests about what 2 silver could buy a man these days. Mock condolences to the mountain fool who had just made the poorest bargain in a decade. Where are your belongings?
Freya gestured toward the corner.
A single, battered trunk waited there. That was all. Everything she owned in the world fit into one chest smaller than a saddle. Cormac lifted it. It weighed almost nothing. He nodded toward the doors. She followed him in silence, moving with the careful precision of someone whose bones hurt. How long had she traveled? How long since she had eaten a proper meal, slept in a proper bed, been called by name instead of by height? The afternoon light struck them like a slap after the incense-thick dimness of the hall. His old wagon waited at the hitching post, a generous word for the rickety thing, held together by prayer and stubborn nails. His old dun-mare Brindle dozed in the traces. He helped Freya up onto the bench seat, noted how light she was when his hands circled her waist, how fragile the bones felt beneath the loose cloth, all height and no substance, hollow, starving. Starving for weeks, perhaps. She arranged her skirts, folded her hands in her lap, stared straight ahead at nothing. Cormac climbed up beside her, took up the reins before he could signal Brindle to move. A rider pulled up alongside them. Lord Malric Vane rode a black destrier that had cost more than Cormac's entire holding. His riding cloak lined with silver fox fur, his rings catching the sun, his smile pleasant, his eyes as cold as the mountain lakes in first frost. Blackthorn, Cormac's jaw tightened. Vane, I heard you made quite a purchase within. Malric's gaze slid to Freya. Dismissive, contemptuous, cataloging her the way a man catalogs livestock. One must admire the economy of it. 2 silver. My, what a shrewd bargainer you have become. Was there something you wanted? Only to remind you. Malric smiled wider. Your rent payment falls due in 90 days. 600 gold pieces. Or the lands of Blackthorn revert to me. As agreed, Cormac's hands tightened on the reins. Brindle shifted her weight. I will have your gold. Will you? A soft, amused sound. I do believe you believe that. Malric studied Freya again. Though I suspect your reserves are somewhat reduced now. What with this investment, and a mate of such prodigious appetite will surely eat you out of house and hall before the first snow. Assuming she does not first collapse the roof beneath her weight beside him, Cormac felt Freya take a careful breath, but she did not flinch, did not react. She had heard these words before. Perhaps she heard them every day. Are we finished? Malric studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. For today, but do consider my standing offer. 500 gold for the whole holding. Take your mate. Start fresh in some southern hamlet where survival is less. Rigorous, he tipped his gloved hand toward Freya in mock courtesy. My lady, welcome to the Highlands. May you weather your first winter." He wheeled the destrier and rode off, a cloud of yellow dust rolling behind him. Freya waited until the hoofbeats faded into the road behind them. A friend, her voice dry as summer bark, despite everything, despite the ruin of an afternoon and the ruin of his purse. Cormac almost smiled. "I would not say that. What does he want with your lands? Timber. Old-growth white pine. The kind the crown buys for warships. He has been circling my holdings for 2 winters. I have refused to sell, and now he squeezes. Now he squeezes." She was quiet a moment. 2 silver, and a piece of land you cannot pay for. "Quite the kingdom you have built, Alpha King Blackthorn." He did smile then, brief. "Rueful, when you put it that way. I begin to understand why no one else bid on you. Sharp tongue. Among my many flaws, I trust you will discover the rest." Cormac clicked to Brindle. The old mare heaved a sigh that was almost human and started them forward. The town of Ironhold fell away behind them. The late afternoon sun turned the grasslands of Ravenmoor gold and amber. The mountains reared to the north, white at the peaks even in summer. They rode in silence for a time. He was very aware of her, the straight spine, despite the obvious weariness. The way her eyes swept the landscape. Not admiring, assessing, cataloging. As if she were reading the country. How far, her voice cutting through the silence. An hour. "My holding sits against the foothills. West of the ridge line, how many head?" He hesitated, because here was the embarrassing part, 38. Diaries beasts was 42 last moon. "But I lost 4 to timber wolves. 38 is a subsistence herd, I know, and the hall, a keep. Old, 2 rooms fit to live in. It keeps the weather out." A pause. Mostly, she might have smiled. "It was hard to tell in the sidelong light. Mostly. And you work this holding alone." "I did." He glanced at her. "Now there are 2 of us. 2 of us." She turned the words over in her mouth. Then she looked at him, really looked. For the first time since the auction hall. "Why did you bid on me?" The question hung between them like something breakable. He considered lying, making it sound noble, or calculated, or anything other than what it was. But something in her face made lying impossible. So he did not lie. "It did not seem right," he said finally. "What would have happened if no one bid?" "So you spent your last silver on pity." "Not pity." He struggled for the words. "You had not folded," he said. "After the journey, after the auction, after every man in that hall did his best to break you. You were still on your feet. That is not nothing." She turned to look at him fully now. "I had nowhere else to go. I know that feeling." Something passed between them then. Not understanding, not yet. Only recognition. 2 people who had reached the end of their ropes and found each other dangling in the same wind. "What happened to your last mate?" He should have expected the question. It landed like a punch anyway, Liana. She left 3 winters past. Went south to a coastal keep with a lord named William Ashwater. He owned half the shipyards there. Divorce papers arrived 6 months later. "I am sorry, do not be." She was right to leave. I could not give her the life she wanted, which was one that did not involve choosing between mending the roof and buying feed for winter. One where she did not have to boil her own soap and wear the same 2 dresses until they came apart at the seams. He paused. One with possibility. Freya absorbed this. Turned her face back to the road. "And what life do you think I wanted, my Lord Blackthorn? I do not know. But I would guess it was not this." "No," softly. "It was not this." They crested a rise then. And there it was. His holding. Such as it was, the keep hunched against the hillside like something trying to hide. Old stone. Weathered gray. One of the shutters hanging crooked on its hinge. The great hall had been reduced to 2 habitable rooms, after the east wing collapsed the winter before last. He had never had the coin to repair it. The barn sagged toward the west, clearly wanting propping. The Diaries pen had gaps where posts had rotted through, and there, near the ruins of the smaller barn, sat an old forge, abandoned, rusted, cold for 5 winters now, ever since the Pax blacksmith had died of the lung fever. Beside him, Freya went very still. "This is my holding, Cormac." Hating how defeated his own voice sounded. "It is not much. It has walls. It has walls. And a roof." She turned to look at him. "That is more than I had this morning. He pulled Brindle to a stop before the keep, climbed down, reached up to help her descend. She hesitated for the space of a breath, then placed her hands upon his shoulders and let him lift her down. Up close, he could see the fine lines of exhaustion at the corners of her eyes. The way she swayed slightly on her feet. When did you last eat? She had to think about it. Yesterday morning, I think. The days have run together. Come inside. The great hall of Blackthorn was dim and spare. Once it had held banners. His father's warriors gathered here for the season's councils. Now it held a rough table, 2 chairs, a stone hearth taller than most men, and the ghost of every dream Cormac had ever failed to build. He set the trunk down. The bedchamber is yours. She turned to him sharply. This is your keep, and I am your mate, by law if by nothing else. You should have the bedchamber, my lord, Cormac, he interrupted. If we are bound, we may as well use given names. Cormac, she tested the shape of it. I do not expect you to give up your bed for me. This is an arrangement between us, nothing more. We both understand that, do we? The question caught her off guard. I needed a way to survive. You needed. What? Help with the holding. A woman to cook and clean. We have made a practical bargain, my lord Blackthorn. Cormac, is that what you think this is? Is it not? She lifted her chin. Defiant, but he could see the fear beneath. The fear of hoping for anything more and being disappointed for it. He moved to the hearth, began building the fire, gave his hands something to do so. His mouth could try to find honest words. I think, he said carefully, that we both needed something we cannot yet name. I think we are both rising from things we do not speak of. He struck flint, watched the sparks catch the kindling. And I think that in that auction hall today, we made a promise to each other. Whether we meant to or not. A promise to keep our feet, to still be here when winter comes, the kindling caught. Firelight began to fill the chamber. He stood and faced her. I will not lie to you, Freya. I do not have much to offer. This holding is dying. I am indebted to a man who would like nothing better than to see me in a shallow grave beneath his boot. And I spent my last 2 silver coins upon a woman I do not know, for reasons I cannot fully name. He paused. But I am still here, still fighting, and if you are willing to fight as well, then perhaps we still have a chance. She studied him for a long moment. He could see her working through it, weighing risks, weighing his face against the memory of every man who had ever failed her, trying to decide if she could trust him. Even a little, finally, I will take the bedchamber. Her voice quiet. Only because I am exhausted, and I fear I will collapse where I stand if I do not sit down soon. Tomorrow we will speak of proper arrangements. Fair enough. He heated a small iron pot of beans and salt pork over the fire. Nothing fine, but hot, filling. They ate in silence. Freya consumed her food with the careful efficiency of someone who had known real hunger. When she finished, she looked marginally more human. Some color returning to her pale cheeks. She gestured vaguely toward the bedchamber door. Of course, at the threshold she paused. Looked back. Cormac, yes, thank you. For the 2 silver coins, before he could answer, she closed the door softly behind her. He stood alone in the firelight, listening to the small sounds of her moving, the rustle of fabric, the creak of the old bed frame, a long, slow exhale that might have been relief or grief or both together. He had spent his last silver upon a woman who did not trust him, for a holding that was dying. Against a fight he was almost certain to lose. But for the first time in 3 winters, the keep did not feel empty. Outside, the Highland night settled in vast and star-flung above the mountains of Ravenmoor, and a wind rolled down from the frost peaks, carrying the promise of winter. And somewhere on the border of sleep, Cormac Blackthorn made a decision he would spend the next 90 days trying to keep. He would not lose again. Dawn came cold and gray. He woke on the flagstones near the hearth, his back a map of complaints from the hard floor. He lay still for a moment, listening to the silence. But the silence was different now, occupied. There was another person breathing behind that closed door. Another heartbeat sharing this space with him. He rose quietly, built up the fire, set the kettle. The familiar motion steadied him. Because what did a man say to a mate he had bought for 2 silver? What did she expect from him? What did he expect from himself? The bedchamber door opened as he was slicing rashers into the iron pan. Freya emerged, looking somehow both better and worse than the night before. Better because she had clearly slept. Some of the exhaustion had lifted from around her eyes. Worse because the morning light was less forgiving than firelight, highlighting the hollows in her cheeks, the narrowness of her wrists, the way her dress hung on a frame that had known real hunger for a long while. Good morrow. His voice neutral. Good morrow. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly unsure of her place in this new hall. I should be doing that. Doing what? Cooking. Is that not part of the arrangement? He flipped the meat, considered his words carefully. Freya. I did not buy a servant. I can cook my own morning meal. Then what did you buy? Sharper than she probably intended. Frustration speaking through the careful control. He looked at her directly. Honestly, I do not yet know. But perhaps we could work it out together. Instead of you assuming the worst of me before the sun has cleared the ridge, she blinked, clearly taken aback. Then slowly, some of the rigidity left her shoulders. That is fair. I apologize. No need. The kettle is boiling. There is tea in the tin above the mantel. They ate in a silence that was less comfortable than cautious, 2 strangers learning to orbit one another. Cormac watched her from the corner of his sight. Noticed how she ate slowly now that she was not starving, how she held her cup in both hands as if warming herself against something more than the morning chill, how her gaze kept drifting to the window, to the ruined outbuildings, to the land beyond. Tell me about the holding, she said finally. The true state of it, not the version you gave those men in Ironhold. He set down his knife. What do you wish to know? Everything. If I am to be here, I should understand what we are facing, we. The words sat in the air between them. Small. Significant, so he told her. About how the lands were not truly his. How he had lived here under the homestead laws of the crown for 8 winters. But how Lord Malric had bought the original deed from the widow of a man named Henrik Amsel. A woman who had left for the southern courts years before. About the 600 gold pieces of back rent Malric claimed. About the 90 days he had before the holding reverted to Vane's hands. About the white pine forest that would make Malric a wealthy man once he cleared it for the crown's shipyards. 38 Dury beasts, Freya, when he finished, her fingers tapping against her cup in a rhythm that suggested calculation. How many would you need to sell to raise 600 gold? All of them. At prime prices, which would leave me with nothing to rebuild upon. And Malric knows this. He is counting upon it. So you are cornered, cannot earn enough, cannot sell your way out, cannot flee because you would lose your homestead claim. That is the shape of it. And Malric is not waiting for you to fail. No, he is helping me fail. Every chance he gets. She looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Then we need something he does not expect, such as she stood, crossed to the window, stared out at the yard, at the ruined stone shape of the old forge sitting in the morning fog. That forge. Does it still function? He blinked at the sudden turn. I do not know. Has not been fired since I have held this place. The old smith died 5 winters back. I never learned the craft. I have. She turned to face him. My father was master smith of the Northland Guild, trained me at the anvil from 12 winters old. I can work iron, steel, copper, bronze. I have made warhammers for the northern chieftains and hinges for the humblest cottage doors. If that forge can be fired, I can make it earn. Hope flared in his chest. Fragile as new flame, you mean? I mean there is a silver mining camp 4 days north. Silver Hollow, growing fast. They need tools, picks, shovels, nails, horseshoes, blades, things that break and wear and must be replaced constantly. She crossed her arms. Things I can make. Things we can sell. For coin, real coin. 90 days may be enough. He stood slowly, crossed to where she stood at the window. I do not know, but I know that sitting here doing nothing guarantees that we lose. At least this way we fight. She met his eyes. Stead, you spent your last silver upon me. You said you did not buy a servant. Very well. You bought a smith. Let me work. He looked at her, this woman. This strange, tall, fierce woman with the tired eyes and the bruised hope. Was offering him a chance when he had none. When wisdom and pride and every hard experience had told him it was over. His father's voice came to him then. Across the years. Across the smoke of the funeral pyre where they had burned the old Alfaking after Ravenfield. Son. A true Alfaking is not the strongest man in the pack. He is the one who stands up the most times. Very well, he said. Let us see if the forge still breathes. They spent the morning walking the wreck of the smithy. The stone forge itself was in rough shape, bricks crumbling at the mouth. Bellows rotted through. The anvil rust-crusted but sound beneath, tools scattered, broken, abandoned to weather. But Freya moved through the ruin with the confidence of someone who had come home. We can mend this, running her hands along the old anvil, most of it. We need new bellows, fresh coal, replacement tongs, files. But the bones are good. How much coin? She calculated silently. 40 gold. Perhaps 50. Cormac felt his heart sink. I do not have 40 gold. Then we borrow it. From whom? Vane. He would enjoy that, placing me deeper in his debt. No. She turned to face him. From the community. From other holders. Small sums from many hands. We explain what we are doing. We offer them first pick of tools at cost. We build trust, and if they refuse, then we find another way. But we do not give up. She said it with such absolute conviction that he almost believed her. Almost. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. You could leave. Take your chances in Ironhold. Find work at any inn along the trade road. You owe me nothing, do I not? She stepped closer. You gave me dignity when I had none. You looked at me, actually looked at me, when every other man in that hall saw only a freak or a jest or a burden. Her voice dropped. That is worth more than a pouch of silver. That is worth fighting for. He could not breathe, suddenly could not speak. This woman, then we fight. He managed at last. Together, she extended her hand. He took it, a workman's grip, firm, sealed. A contract between two people who had nothing else to bring to a bargain but themselves. He set out that afternoon. Alone, on Brindle. Riding the wide, slow circuit of the Western Holdings. The first 3 holds turned him away. Alfaking Redcliffe laughed in his face and closed the great door. Alphathorn would not even come to the yard. At the Wintervale steeding, they gave him bread but shook their heads at the ask. His pride burned. His father would not have begged. His father would never. But his father had also died at Ravenfield. And pride, Cormac was beginning to understand, was another kind of coffin. The 4th hold was Eldred the Grey's. The old Alfaking sat by his hearth, as though he had been waiting for the knock. 65 winters. Silver hair worn long in the old northern fashion. A crooked back from an old spear wound. Eyes that had seen too much and not looked away from any of it. He had ridden with Cormac's father in the last of the border wars. He had carried Cormac out of the wreckage of Ravenfield with his own hands when the field ran red. Sit down, boy. Cormac sat. You did not come here for supper. No. Then say it plain. So he did. All of it. Malric. The forge. Freya. The 2 silver. The 90 days. The plan that was hope built on nothing but a stranger's hands and a stubborn woman's word. Eldred listened. Did not interrupt. When Cormac finished, the old man stared into his fire for a long time. Then he stood, went to his chest at the wall, opened it, counted out 20 gold pieces onto the table, with hands that shook slightly with age, but not with hesitation. 20. Eldred, repay it when you can. No interest, no terms. He looked up, eye as bright as struck flint. We are blood brothers, Cormac Blackthorn. Your father pulled me out of a river in the spring of the wolf year. You pulled me out of a burning tent at Ravenfield when I could not stand. This is not charity. This is what the old bond means. He paused and beat that scented bastard vein. That I ask for free. Cormac's throat closed. I will repay every coin. You will beat him. That is repayment enough. At Wren Ashwood's holding, he found the widow at her paddock. A tall, lean woman of 40 winters, sun-weathered. A face that had not smiled easily since her mate died at Ravenfield beside Cormac's father. 2 sons. A working holding. Not wealthy. But steady. She listened. Did not interrupt, 15 gold when he finished. And I will send my eldest, Rowan, to help you raise the new bellows and rebuild the flue. He is strong, and he learns quickly. He should be doing honest work anyway. Rather than moping about the yard chasing my hens, Rin, that is more than Vane killed my mate's cousin 2 winters back over a boundary dispute, or he had it done. Same thing, she gave him a look. Flat and hard as the mountain stone. Do not thank me for coin. Thank me by finishing him. Old Gareth met him at the gate of his one-room cottage. The lands around it had once been Gareth's. Malric had taken half of them 2 winters ago through a document that had turned out to have signatures no one remembered making. He was 60 winters. Bent, poor. His whole world reduced to a cottage and a single milk goat. He pressed 10 gold into Cormac's hand. That is all I have, Gareth. I cannot. Then I will throw it in the mud. And you will pick it up out of the mud. Either way, you are taking it, boy. A rare smile cracked the old man's weathered face. My gold will fight Malric. That is a use I did not think it would live to see. Cormac rode back to Blackthorn in the fading light. 45 gold in his saddlebag, but heavier than the coin. Something he had not carried in a long time. The knowledge that he was not alone. The next morning, Freya rode to Ironhold with the coin. Cormac watched her go, broad shoulders squared. Head lifted now, as if the borrowed trust of 3 old friends had straightened her spine along with his. She returned by dusk with a laden wagon. Coal, iron stock, leather for new bellows, tools, files, tongs. A small brass measuring square that had cost extra but which she said was worth every copper because you cannot smith what you cannot measure. She worked 18 hours that first day, rebuilding the forge from memory and instinct and the muscle in her hands. Rowan Ashwood arrived at dawn on the second day. Strong, silent, willing, together with a wolf-blooded neighbor named Silverpaw, who had walked over the ridge to help without being asked. They hoisted stones, rebuilt the flue, cured the leather, set the new bellows in place. By the 3rd dawn, the forge was breathing again. Freya lit it herself on the 4th morning. Cormac stood in the doorway of the smithy and watched. The coals caught. Heat began to rise. Freya worked the bellows with steady rhythm. She placed a length of iron stock into the fire, waited. The metal glowed dull red, then bright red, then orange, then a color close to the color of sunrise on the frost peaks. She drew it out, set it on the anvil, raised the hammer, and brought it down. The ring of hammer on iron rang out across the yard. Across the pastures where the 38 Diaries lifted their heads, across the ruined outbuildings, across the valley itself. A clean, sharp sound that had not sounded here for 5 long winters. Agon. And again, and again. Her movements were precise, economical. Each strike deliberate. Beautiful in the way that only true craft is beautiful. She was making a horseshoe, the humblest of a smith's tasks. And she was making it as though the world depended on it. Perhaps because it did. In 20 minutes she had finished. Plunged the shoe hissing into the water bucket. Lifted it out. Examined it in the shaft of morning light coming through the smithy door. She looked up, caught him watching. Well, you are extraordinary, she looked surprised, as if the compliment had struck her from an unexpected quarter, and she did not know how to catch it. It is only a horseshoe. It is hope, he corrected, voice quieter than he meant it. It is a chance. It is the whole of everything. She set the shoe aside carefully, almost reverent, and she smiled small. Uncertain, as if she had not smiled in so long that her face had forgotten the shape of it. Then let us make more. Outside, the highland wind rolled down from the frost peaks. Winter still 6 weeks off. 90 days until Malric's collector would come for gold that Cormac Blackthorn did not yet have. But somewhere in the sound of that first hammer strike, in the ring of iron finding its shape, in the small, stubborn smile of a woman who had cost him everything and might yet save him, he had begun to believe. The first week became a rhythm, and the rhythm became a life. Cormac learned the shape of a smithy day. Up before the dawn cracked over the frost peaks. Feed the Diaries. Break the ice on the trough. Count the herd twice because Malric's men had been seen along the boundary line, and one missing head was a fortune neither of them could afford. Then, back to the smithy where Freya had already fired the coals, where the air was thick with the sweetness of hot iron and the sharpness of coal smoke. Where a woman stood at an anvil and struck sparks from nothing. He became her second hand, because that was what she needed. Because standing beside her was somehow the least strange thing about the strangest season of his life. She would point. He would pass her a tool. She would nod. He would work the bellows in the slow, deep rhythm that kept the coals white hot. She would raise the hammer, and the ring would fill the yard. They spoke little while working. They did not need to. But at night. At night was when the trouble started, because Cormac Blackthorne began to notice things. The way she pushed a stray curl of hair back from her forehead with the back of her wrist so as not to smear soot on her cheek. The small crease that appeared between her brows when a piece did not sit right on the anvil. The half smile she wore when a horseshoe came out clean on the first pass. The way she rolled her right shoulder before every fifth strike, because an old injury lived there and hadn't quite healed. Small things. Foolish things. Except a man notices small things about a woman only when he has begun to feel a very large thing about her. And a very large thing was the last complication Cormac Blackthorne could afford. She is your mate by law, that is all. That is the arrangement. She said so herself the first night, but then she would look up from her hammer and catch him watching, and she would raise one eyebrow, and she would not look away, and Cormac Blackthorne, 34 winters old, veteran of Ravenfield, alpha king of a dying holding, would feel his chest do a foolish thing he did not have permission to feel. Have you ever fallen for someone you were forbidden to want? The first tools left the yard on the 8th day. A crate of 30 horseshoes to a farrier in the trade town of Ironhold, 10 pounds of nails to a carpenter rebuilding a barn along the East Ridge, a set of tongs and a bracket to old Gareth as a gift because he had given his last 10 gold, and Cormac would not let that go unanswered. Coin returned in a small, heavy pouch, 32 gold. Freya spread it on the kitchen table beside the flickering tallow lamp. Counted it with her long, careful fingers. Looked up. 32. 32. How much do we owe? 45 to Etheldred and Wren and Gareth combined. 600 to Vane. So we are worth 32 gold, and down by 45. And nothing on the debt yet. You are counting like a merchant. I was raised on a smith's ledger. My father taught me to count before he taught me to read. Your father sounds like a fine man? Something crossed her face then. A quick shadow. Gone before he could name it, he was. She did not say more. He did not ask more, because Cormac Blackthorne had learned that pain kept its own hours, and did not care to be summoned before it was ready. By the end of week 2, the ledger showed 110 gold in the pouch. By the end of week 3, 160. Freya was working from before first light until well past dark. 16 hours on some days, 18 on others. Cormac had begun to worry because he saw the tremor in her hand when she reached for the second cup of tea in the morning, because he saw the way she leaned against the anvil for a moment when she thought no one was watching. Because he saw a woman he was coming to love, pushing herself toward a cliff he could not reach in time, but he did not know how to tell her to stop. She would not have listened, and they were closer with each passing day. 200 gold. 220. The mountain of 600 no longer looked like a mountain. It looked like a hill they might just crest. Which was exactly when Lord Malric Vane remembered they existed. It began with coal. Cormac rode into Ironhold on the morning of the 22nd day with an empty wagon and a coin pouch and a written order for 2 barrels of forge-grade coal from Meacham the merchant. Meacham had supplied Blackthorne Holdings for 6 winters. He was a fat, cheerful man with a soft laugh and hands that always smelled faintly of pipe smoke. He would not meet Cormac's eyes. I cannot sell to you today, my Lord Blackthorne. You've 2 barrels sitting in your yard. I can see them from where I stand. They are. Spoken for, Meacham. My lord, look at me. The fat merchant looked. And Cormac saw it. The fear, the apology, the shame of a man who owed 6 mouths at his table and could not afford to lose a customer higher than the alfaking of a failing holding. How much did he pay you to refuse me?" Meacham's face crumpled. "He did not pay, my lord. He threatened. Said any merchant in Ironhold who trades with Blackthorn will find their license reviewed by the town elder next spring. Said their storehouses would be inspected for irregularities." A hollow laugh. "There are always irregularities in a merchant storehouse. Even in an honest man's storehouse, I understand." He did understand. He put a hand on Meacham's shoulder, briefly, because there was no point in raging at a man who was drowning in the same river. "May the Moon Mother keep your family through the winter. And yours, my lord." He rode 2 more days north to Ravenspire. Paid double, half a wagon load of coal instead of 2 barrels. Rode home in a mist that turned to rain that turned to sleet before he crossed the last ridge onto Blackthorn land. Freya met him at the yard, her hair unbound, a shawl about her shoulders. Because she had been listening for the wagon since dark. "How bad? Twice the price. Half the coal, so we work harder. Waste less." She helped him unload the barrels. The rain running down both their faces, neither of them speaking, and when the last barrel was in the smithy, she turned to him and put a hand on his forearm. Just for a moment, just long enough for the heat of her fingers to burn through the wet fabric of his sleeve. "Thank you for going. It is what I said I would do, I know. That is why I thank you." She went inside. He stood in the wet yard for another minute. Because the print of her hand still burned on his arm. Because it was the first time she had touched him without needing to. Because a foolish thing had become a very large thing indeed. The hammer broke on the 28th day. Freya was 10 strokes into a set of plow blades for a farmer down at the low fields. The stroke came down clean, but the head sheared off the haft mid-swing, whipped past her jaw close enough to catch the tail of her braid. Struck the smithy wall with a sound like a stone hitting a shield, and bit 2 inches deep into the timber. She stood very still. Cormac was there before he had thought to move, his hands on her shoulders, turning her, looking her over. Neck, jaw, hand, nothing torn, nothing broken. Only a red line along her cheek where the wooden splinter had scored her skin. "Freya, I am not hurt. You could have been killed, but I was not. Show me the haft." He picked up the broken piece of the handle, turned it over, and then he saw it. Beneath the fresh break, under the grain of the ash wood, a cut, not a natural crack, a deliberate scoring, a saw cut, made from the underside where a working smith would not see it, filed thin, waiting for the right stroke to give way. Someone did this, yes, when, during the night. Perhaps last night, perhaps 2 nights back. Anyone could have slipped in past the barn while we slept. He stared at the ruined haft, and his hand began to shake with something that was not fear. "He wants you injured. He wants us slowed. He wants you injured, Freya. Do you understand? If that head had come down 2 inches to the left, it would have taken your face. If it had come down straight, it would have crushed your hand. This was not a delay. This was a wound. Delivered by proxy, she took the ruined haft from his fingers. Set it aside, then he will not stop. He will only get bolder." "No," Cormac said. "No." He was pacing now, around the anvil, fists opening and closing. "I bought you for 2 silver. I did not bring you into my hall so that some coin-heavy coward could send men in the night to try to kill you at your own trade. He did not try to kill me. He tried to break me. There is a difference. Not to me." Cormac, she caught his hand, held it, forced him to stop pacing. "Look at me." He looked. "I have been broken before. I do not break easy. You should not have to prove that again, perhaps. But this is how we win. We do not stop. We do not slow. We make him spend himself throwing stones at a mountain. Sooner or later he will run out of stones." He looked at her, standing there, with a red line still fresh on her cheek, with her braid ragged where the hammerhead had clipped it, with her eyes steady on his. And he loved her more in that moment than he had loved anyone in the whole of his life. The wind changed direction that afternoon. Cold came down from the frost peaks. Real cold. The kind that promises the first snow within a week. Cormac stood at the smithy door watching the mountains gray over, and he understood 2 things at once. That winter was closer than he had feared. and that this was the last quiet moment they would have before the storm arrived, which was why he wasn't ready when Finn Hollowbrook rode into the yard. The boy was 25 winters at most, a wolf of the western reaches. Freckled, sandy-haired, the kind of face that had probably never learned how to lie because it was too honest a face for the trade. He rode a mule that was more bone than muscle, dismounted, turned his cap in his hands. My Lord Blackthorn, Finn Hollowbrook, you remember me. I remember every face that stood the line at Ravenfield. Yours was there, in the second rank. Beside your father, he fell there, I know. I am sorry. The boy looked at his boots. I came to tell you something. Something you should know. Freya had come to stand at the smithy door, wiping her hands on a rag. Watching? Speak it then, Lord Vane. He is planning something. I do not know what. But he has been asking questions in Ironhold. About your coin, about how close you are to the payment, about who has been buying from your forge. How do you know this? I heard him. At the tavern. He did not know I was there. Freya's eyes narrowed. Which tavern? The Heart and Crown. That is Vane's own tavern. Locals do not drink there. Why were you there? The boy's face went white, then red, then the color of ash. Finn. Cormac's voice quiet now. Very quiet. Tell me the truth. Before your next breath, or I will know it in your face and I will like the answer even less. The boy folded, sat down hard on the mounting block, put his face in his hands. He said he would help. He said he would send medicine. My mate Isolde. She has the moon fever. It has been 3 moons. She grows worse. There is no coin for the good herbs, the kind the healer from Silver Hollow sells. Vane said if I brought him news of what happens at Blackthorn, he would send Isolde the medicine is himself. Said the good stuff, the kind that saves lives. And did he send it? He sent something. The boy looked up, his eyes wet, colored water. That is all it was. I mixed it in her tea for a full moon, and she got worse, and I went back to him, and he laughed. He laughed at me. Said the medicine was in the second half. Said he would send it after I brought him something worth having. Something big. About your smith. About your coin. Silence. The wind ran through the yard. The beasts moved in their pen. Cormac stood very still. And within him a whole storm of things was happening at once. Rage. Because Vane was worse even than Cormac had thought. Pity. Because the boy in front of him was drowning. Grief. Because he had been that boy once, younger than this, standing at his father's pyre with the whole world gray around him. And underneath all of it, something clear as a bell struck at dawn. He knew what to do. He had wondered once what he would do if he were ever in a position to be either merciful or cruel. And he had promised himself he would remember what mercy had cost the people who had shown it to him, and what the lack of it had cost the people who had refused. He crossed the yard, sat down on the mounting block beside Finn Hollowbrook, put a hand on the boy's shoulder. How old is your mate? 22. And your child? Finn looked up, startled. How did you? You held your hand over your left pocket when you dismounted, where a man keeps a wooden token carved for a child. My father did the same. I did the same before I lost the right to, a daughter, 6 moons old. Rowan. Cormac was quiet for a long moment. I will not kill you, Finn. I will not even strike you. Because I understand exactly why you did it. There is nothing a man will not do for his mate and his child. Nothing. And a lord who trades on that hunger deserves whatever the Moon Mother sends him in the end. The boy was crying, now. Silent. Shoulders shaking. But Cormac's voice hardened. Just a little. You will tell me everything you told Vane. Every word. And then you will do one more thing for him. You will keep pretending. You will tell him what I tell you to tell him. You will feed him lies until he chokes on them. And in exchange, he looked toward the smithy, toward Freya, who had not moved from the doorway. Wren Ashwood will ride to your holding tonight with the real medicine, the good stuff, from her own store, and she will stay until your Isolde walks again. Finn stared at him. Why? Because a man once told me that a lord who cannot show mercy has already lost the pack. My father said that. He said it the last night we spoke before he rode to Ravenfield. I have been a poor student of his lesson. It is time I paid better attention. The boy dropped to one knee. My lord, do not kneel to me. Kneel to your mate beside her sickbed. Where you belong, now ride, Finn rode. Cormac watched him go, and when he turned back toward the smithy, Freya was standing there, cloth still balled in her fist, eyes shining wet in the last of the daylight. That was well done. He was already punished. I did not need to add to it. Most men would have. Most men do not know what it feels like to lose a mate. She looked at him then, and something in her face shifted. Some final wall began to lean. Not fall completely, just lean, Cormac. Yes, when we win, when this is over, I want you to teach my son the words your father said. If we ever have one, which was the closest she had come to saying anything about a future between them. Which was the closest he had come to hearing it. Which was more than either of them was ready to hold. He nodded, just once, because he could not trust his voice, and went to feed the Diaries beasts. The barn raising happened on the 40th day. It happened because Eldred the Grey rode into the yard on his old warhorse and would not leave until Cormac had agreed. Because Wren Ashwood arrived the same afternoon with a wagon of timber cut from her back lot. Because old Gareth trudged over the ridge on foot at dawn with a sack of nails he had saved for 2 winters and never used. Because the story of the 2 silver mate had traveled the valley faster than any of them could have carried it. And because the people of these highlands had lived under Malric Vane's shadow long enough. And they were, all of them, hungry for something to stand around and call their own. 50 people came, 50, to a holding that had not held 50 people in it since the last summer festival before Ravenfield. They tore down the old smithy walls on the first day. They laid new stone foundations on the second. On the third, they raised the roof. Real timbers. White pine from Cormac's own back lot, cut fresh and hauled by 6 men and 2 draft horses. Freya directed the work at the forge itself because she was the only one who knew where the fluve needed to sit and how deep the water bucket had to be. And the men listened to her. Every one of them. A woman 4 inches taller than most of them and a lifetime more skilled. They listened because she knew. Cormac watched her, standing on a plank 6 feet off the ground, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hair coming loose in the wind, directing 3 men on how to seat the chimney stone. Actually laughing when Rowan Ashwood got a smear of mortar in his eyebrow, and Cormac Blackthorne thought, I have never seen anything so beautiful in all my life. The thought arrived without asking permission, which is how the true ones always arrive. There was music that night. Eldred had brought his fiddle. Wren had brought her drum. Someone had brought a jug of hard cider that had been meant for a wedding that was postponed after the groom took ill. And now here it was in the yard of a holding half the valley had written off 6 winters ago. And the yard was full of lights, so Cormac and Freya danced, because everyone else was dancing. Because Eldred had struck the first note of a slow reel and looked at them meaningfully. Because Freya had put down her cup and held out her hand, and Cormac could not have refused her if the sky had opened. They were not good at it. He knew the old northern dances his father had taught him, and she knew the Highland reels she had learned in her mother's kitchen, and neither of them matched. So they made something up, something clumsy. Something that was more them holding on to each other than dancing, which was better than the dancing would have been. Under her breath. Where only he could hear, I have not danced since I was a girl. I have not danced since Lyanna. Then we are both learning, Cormac, yes, I am. Frightened. Of what? Of hope. Of the size of it. Of what happens if we lose. We will not lose. You cannot promise that. I can promise this. I will not stop trying. Whatever comes, that will have to be enough. That will have to be enough. The music ended. They stood a moment longer than they should have. He did not kiss her. She did not kiss him. They both walked away carrying something they had not walked in with. The offer came 10 days later. The stranger arrived at midday, rode a bay palfrey, wore a merchant's cloak of a decent cut, spoke with the careful vowels of a coastal city. His name was Vaelric. He was, he explained pleasantly, a factor for the crown's own arsenal, a purchaser of arms and tools for the eastern garrisons. He had heard, through certain channels, of the quality of work coming out of the Blackthorn Forge. He had a proposition. They sat him at the kitchen table. Freya poured tea. Cormac read the contract twice, 800 gold. Per month, my lord. For the delivery of 200 items to specification. Swords, spearheads, arrowheads, whatever the arsenal requires. Per month, per month. Freya's hand had stopped moving on the teapot. 800 gold. In 1 month. Would clear Malric. Would repay every borrowed coin. Would set them up for the winter with reserves and coin left over. Would end all of it. In 30 days, Cormac read the contract a third time. He was not a man of letters. He had learned to read in his father's hall from a traveling scribe. He was better with iron than with ink, but he had also learned from the Battle of Ravenfield that men who did not read carefully died, and so he read. And on the fourth reading, he found it. Section 7. Subsection 3. Toward the bottom. In smaller script than the rest. In the event of any failure of delivery according to specifications, the buyer reserves the right to seize any and all materials and equipment utilized in the production of said items as compensation for breach of contract. He set the contract down. You will forgive me a moment. He rose, walked outside, around the corner of the keep, stood with his back to the stone and closed his eyes and breathed. Because he wanted it. Moon Mother forgive him. He wanted it so badly it burned. 800 gold, in 30 days. It would end everything, except one late delivery, one flawed piece, one winter storm that kept the wagon from reaching the arsenal on time. And Vaelric took the forge, took the anvil, took the bellows and the tongs and the whole smithy his neighbors had raised for them in 3 days of shared labor. Took the tools, took Freya's livelihood, took her hands. And then Cormac heard, at the back of his skull, the voice of Eldred the Grey the night he had lent the 20 gold. That scented bastard Vane. Beat him for me. And it clicked. He walked back inside. Master Vaelric, my lord, would you be willing to strike Section 7, Subsection 3 from this contract? The merchant's smile did not falter. But something in the eyes cooled. Just slightly. I am afraid the Crown's factors do not have such latitude. It is standard language. It is unusual language for an arsenal contract. Usually the buyer pays a penalty for non-delivery, not seizes equipment, an unusual clause for an unusual circumstance. The arsenal must protect itself against a smith who makes horseshoes and nails, against any producer. Freya rose from the table, walked to Cormac's side, rested one long hand on his shoulder blade. Just once. Then let it fall. Master Vaelric. Cormac's voice quiet now. The voice he had used at Ravenfield when the black banners came over the rise. I fought at Ravenfield. I stood the second rank. I watched a good man die because he had signed a paper without reading it carefully. His name was Ansel. He signed a marching order that had been altered by a captain who was in the pay of the enemy. He led 6 men into a Devilefall that was already ambushed. He died. All 6 of them died. Because of paper. Because of what was written in small letters at the bottom of a page, he paused. I do not sign what I have not read. I do not sign what has a hook in it. I do not sign this. He picked up the contract, tore it once, tore it again. Let the pieces fall on the table between them like snow. Vaelric's smile did not last through the second tier. You are making a mistake, my lord. An offer such as this does not come twice. An offer such as this comes from Malric Vane. I would wager the 800 gold I do not have on it. Tell him I said so. Tell him my mate and I will make our own way. Vaelric rose, bowed stiffly, left without touching his tea. They stood at the door and watched him ride out. Freya's voice quiet. He was going to trap us. He was going to gut us. Politely. In our own hall, 800 gold I know. We are still short. We have 310. We need 290 more in 30 days. I know, Cormac. Yes, thank you. For what? For reading the paper. My father used to say, a man who tears up a bad contract is worth more than a man who signs a good one. Your father sounds like a man I would have liked to know. He would have liked you. She did not say more. She turned. She went back into the keep to finish the day's work, but her hand had found his again, just for a moment, on the way past, and he stood in the doorway with his fingers still remembering the shape of hers. The chimney collapsed on the 62nd day. They never found out why. Not exactly. Something in the stonework. Some flaw the barn raising had missed. Some settling of the mortar in a cold snap. Some tiny lie the flue had told itself about its own strength. It did not matter. What mattered was that Freya was at the anvil, bent over a piece of white-hot iron, hammer raised, and the whole chimney above her let go all at once. The first stone struck the anvil beside her. The second struck her right shoulder. The third would have crushed her skull. Except Cormac had turned that moment because he had heard the smallest thing. A shift in the sound of the fire. The little groan a stone makes just before it moves. Some instinct from Ravenfield. Standing under falling arrows. From every time in his life, he had lived because he had learned to hear a wound before it came. He was across the smithy in 3 strides. He caught her around the waist, bore her down, rolled with her. Sheltered her body with his own as the rest of the chimney came in with a roar that took the roof and half the west wall with it. The world was dust and burning coal and the smell of hot iron. He could not breathe. He could feel her under him, small of breaths, shocked, but breathing. That was all he needed. Freya, cough, Freya. Are you? I am here. Someone was calling in the yard, Rowan Ashwood. Old Gareth. He heard them running. He rolled off her, sat up, pulled her up with him. Her right sleeve was smoking where an ember had caught it. He tore it away. There was a long red wheal along her forearm where a coal had rolled against her skin. Her braid had come loose. Her face was gray with stone dust. She was alive. He held her against his chest and put his mouth against her hair and did not speak. Because if he had spoken, it would have been words he was not yet allowed to say. When Rowan pulled them both out of the ruined smithy, they stood in the yard looking at what remained. Not much. The forge itself might be saved. Most of the anvil was undamaged. But the walls, the roof, the flue, the bellows shredded by falling stone, the tools scattered under a mountain of shattered rock. To rebuild would take a week they did not have. They had 5 days left until Malric's collector came for the 600 gold. They had 487. Freya sat down on the mounting block, and for the first time since she had stepped off the auction platform at Ironhold, she wept. Not a small, tidy weeping. A whole broken weeping, shoulders shaking, face in her hands. Cormac knelt in front of her, put his hands over hers, waited. Until she looked up, Freya. Look at me. We are finished. Look at me. She looked. 38 Dury beasts in the pen. Sail in Silver Hollow. If I ride at dawn and push the herd hard, we can be there in 2 days. Sell them. Ride back. We can be here in time, you. You cannot sell the herd. That is the whole holding. The herd is not the holding. You are the holding. Everyone standing in this yard right now is the holding. The land is not the holding. The keep is not the holding. The forge is not the holding. We are the holding. She stared at him. Cormac, say it back to me. We are the holding. Say it again. We are the holding. Then I am selling the herd. She was quiet a long time. They are 8 winters of your life. You are the rest of my life. The words were out of him before he could catch them. She looked at him. He looked back. And for the space of one long breath, under the ruined roof of a smithy that had been full of hope an hour ago, they held each other's eyes and understood exactly what was between them, and exactly what neither of them was going to say aloud yet, because there were still 5 days, and a collector coming, and 38 beasts to drive over hard country to a rough mining camp with a hard buyer, and no room in any of it for the words themselves. But it had been said, in the way that matters, which is not with the mouth. He rose, went to find Eldred and old Gareth, told them the plan. They did not argue. Eldred simply nodded and said he would ride with him. They pushed the herd out at first light. 2 men, 1 old alfaking, 1 young one, and 38 of the ornery cussed magnificent tears that were the last real wealth of the Blackthorn holding. They rode north, towards Silver Hollow, toward whatever price the miner's buyer would offer for a herd that Cormac had built by hand over 8 winters. He rode without looking back, because if he looked back, he would see Freya standing in the yard, and he was not sure he could keep riding if he saw her. The mining camp of Silver Hollow sat in a raw gash cut into the northern hills. Tents, board shacks, mud streets. The smell of wood smoke and coal and unwashed men, 200 souls at least. Maybe 3. The kind of place that ate hope for breakfast and left the bones out in the sun. The livestock buyer was a hard, lean man named Garrick. He wore a wool cap pulled low. His eyes were the color of unwashed slate. He walked the pen twice, looked at teeth, looked at hocks, looked at Cormac, 38 head, mixed ages, decent flesh. Some show wear on the pasterns. I will offer 40 gold for the lot. Cormac's stomach fell out of him. 40. They are worth 150. Any drover in the territory would say the same. Any drover in the territory in a good market, which this is not. I have 3 sellers ahead of you this week. Silver Hollow's mine boss cut wages last moon and half my winter buyers are running short. 40 gold. Take it or drive them home. 50, 40, 45. I have driven them 2 days. I am asking for fair. 40. Eldred put a hand on Cormac's arm. Cormac closed his eyes. Opened them. 40. The exchange happened quickly. Coin counted onto a wooden plank. Herd driven off, threw a chute into a holding pen. Cormac watched them go. Every one of them. The old lead male, whose horn he had knocked flat straightening, with a splint made from a broken stave. The runt he had bottle-fed through her second winter. The twin heifers born in the spring floods, when he had waded thigh-deep into the pen to catch them before the water took them. Every one of them walked into another man's pen. He turned. He put the coin in his saddlebag. He mounted. Eldred did not speak on the ride south, which was one of the great kindnesses of Cormac's life. They rode through the night. Rested only when the horses needed it. Cormac stared into the fire during the one stop they made and heard his father's voice again. Not the voice of the man giving the lesson about mercy, a younger voice. The father who had put a 2-day-old Diaries calf in his arms when Cormac was 6 winters old and said, "Here, this is your first, she is yours. Feed her, guard her, she will teach you what a herd is." He had sold his first herd. He rode on. They came over the last ridge onto Blackthorn land at dawn of the 4th day. 2 days ahead of the deadline. Brindle and Eldred's warhorse both blowing white with exhaustion. Freya met them at the yard. One look at Cormac's face told her everything. How much? 40. Silence. So we have 527. We are 73 gold short, 73. They stood in the yard, the sun coming up gold and pitiless over the peaks. 2 days left, 73 gold short. Everything they had done. Every hammer strike, every night watch, every bit of borrowed coin from every neighbor, every risk, every wound. 73 gold short. Freya laid her hand on Kynna's very gently. You sold the herd. I sold the herd. For me. For us. Cormac, I am so sorry. Do not be sorry. I chose. She kissed him then, not the kiss of a mate to her alfaking on a wedding altar, not the kiss of the auction hall's paper marriage, the kiss of a woman who had walked with a man to the very edge of their world together, and who wanted him to know, before the world took the rest, that she had walked with him, gladly. He kissed her back, and then they walked together into the keep, and they sat down at the kitchen table. And they began to think about what a family did when it lost. The night before Malric's collector was due, Cormac did not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with a tallow candle burning down to a stub between his hands. The window shutter open a crack, cold coming in. He wanted the cold. He wanted to feel something on his face, besides the weight of what tomorrow was going to be. Freya was in the bedchamber, not sleeping. He could hear her turning. As after 88 days of sharing a hall with a person, you begin to hear the sound of them not sleeping the way you hear your own breath. 73 gold short. He had counted the pouch 4 times. He had lined the coins in stacks on the table. He had rearranged them, as though rearranging them might make more of them appear, as though the 73 gold he needed were hiding in a corner of the tabletop he had not yet looked at. Which? It was not, because there was no such corner, because they had done everything they could do, which was the worst part. That was the part that would sit in his chest for the rest of his life, if he lived. The knowledge that they had done everything. Have you ever come to the end of a road and looked back and known there was no road you could have taken that would have carried you further? The bedchamber door opened. Freya stood in the frame, wrapped in a wool blanket, hair down, feet bare on the cold flagstones. He should have told her to go back and put on stockings. He did not. She crossed the room, sat down in the chair across from him, looked at the coins. Still 73, still 73, I keep thinking. If I had worked one more hour a day, if we had asked one more holder for coin, if I had priced the plow blades higher. Do not, Cormac, do not walk that road, Freya. Do not. I have walked it. It has no end. There is no version of the last 3 moons in which we did better. We did all of it. She reached across the table, took his hand. Then I want to say something. Now, before he comes tomorrow, because I do not know what will be here after tomorrow, and I want it said before whatever comes. He waited, when my mate rejected me at the mating altar. In the great hall at Winterhome, he said in front of everyone that he could not stand looking up at his own mate. He said the Moon Mother had made a mistake. He said he refused the bond. Her voice was quiet. Very even. He was 100 people away from me when he said it. And I could hear his voice as if he had said it into my ear. And every person in that hall watched me stand there while my own throat closed. And after that, I did not believe there was such a thing as being seen. As being chosen. I thought that door had closed in my life and no one would ever open it. I thought the best I could hope for was a bargain, some kind of practical arrangement. I thought. She stopped. You bid 2 silver on me, Freya. Let me finish. You bid 2 silver on me. And every man in that hall laughed at both of us. And I want you to know that in the whole of my life, from the day my father died, until the day you set those coins down on the auctioneer's table, there was no one who chose me. There was no one who chose the whole of me. Not one person. Except you. He was looking at the candle, not at her. Because if he looked at her, he would not be able to hold what he needed to hold, Freya. I love you. There it was, said aloud in a stone kitchen in the middle of the night with 73 gold, sitting between them and the end of everything, 12 hours off. I love you, she said again. I know it is not the arrangement we made. I know it is not what we said we would do. I know we have not the time and we have not the coin and we have not the tomorrow. I know all of it. But it does not seem right to me that we walk into what comes tomorrow with these words still unsaid. Because tomorrow they might not get said, and I could not bear it if they were among the things I lost tomorrow. He set the candle down. He looked at her. I have loved you since the 3rd morning, Cormac. You made a horseshoe. And I said it was hope. And you smiled. And I have loved you since that smile. Then this is not the worst night. It is not the worst night. They sat that way a long time, not touching except for the 2 hands across the table. 2 people who had bought each other for 2 silver and were about to lose a piece of the world. And who had this? Which was more than they had had 90 days ago. Which was more than either of them had known was possible. Dawn came slow. Cormac was outside splitting the last of the kindling when he heard the hoofbeats. Not 1 horse, 6 horses. Coming up the ridge road at an even trot, he set the axe down, wiped his hands on his thighs. Malric had come a day early. Because of course he had. Because a man like Malric Vane would take a day of a debtor's peace if he could steal one. Because torment was the greater half of the pleasure, and Malric Vane had come to enjoy the whole of it. Cormac walked out to the yard. Freya came out behind him, cloak pulled about her shoulders against the mountain wind. She stood at his left, where a mate stood, because the mate stood at the sword hand. So the sword hand was free to move. The 6 that crested the yard, Malric at the front. Fur cloak, silver rings. A face that had grown pleased with itself in the last 3 moons. Behind him, 5 men at arms, leather, long knives, 2 with crossbows across the saddle. They did not dismount, Malric did. Blackthorn, you are a day early, Vane. Am I my mistake? Shall I ride back and come again tomorrow? The men at arms laughed. The horses did not. Speak your business. 600 gold. In coin now. Cormac walked to Malric, stood 4 feet from him. We have 527. Malric's smile widened. It was the smile of a man who had been holding his breath for this moment and was now finally free to let it out. 527. Yes, which means, by the terms of the agreement your father signed with the widow Amsel, and which I now hold, this land, this keep, this forge, this yard, these outbuildings, the pastures, the white pine forest, all of it, reverts to me at the ringing of the noon bell in Ironhold today, which is in approximately 3 hours. Yes, you will vacate the premises by sundown. You may take what you can carry, in the way of personal effects. All fixed property remains with the land. I will vacate the premises. With her, of course. Malric's eyes flicked to Freya. I trust you will not require an itemization of what constitutes personal effects. I would hate to have to argue with you about a hammer. Cormac did not answer. He was measuring, because that was what his father had taught him to do when a man came to break you. You measure him. You do not raise your voice. You do not lift your hand. You measure, so that when the moment comes, you strike once and true. Malric took a step closer, because a man like Malric could not resist the extra half-foot of dominance when he had come this far. Blackthorn, Vane, I want you to know something. To know I have enjoyed this. Every moon of it. I enjoyed the coal supplier. I enjoyed the little accident with the hammer haft. I enjoyed the collapse of your chimney. That last was not even me. That was your own poor engineering. But I enjoyed it all the same. I enjoyed the way you scrabbled. I enjoyed the way she wept in her sleep. Cormac's hand did not move, but something behind his eye did. I enjoyed, most of all, Malric continued, buying the whole of your father's holding for less than the cost of a hunting hound. I have wanted this land since I was a boy. My father wanted it before me. My father died wanting it. And you handed it to me for pennies. I want you to know. His voice softening. I want you to know how much pleasure that has given me. Cormac's voice was very quiet. You will regret saying that to me one day, in front of witnesses. On my own yard. Malric laughed. I doubt it. Which is when the second set of hoofbeats came up the road. A single rider, fast. The horse was gray, blown white with foam. It had come at a gallop from the direction of the trade road that led toward the crown's high courts. The rider wore a black cloak with silver fastenings and a chain about his neck of the pattern that meant he was riding on the crown's own business. Malric's face changed, just a little, just enough. The rider came into the yard, reined the gray and hard, slid down, handed the reins to no one, and walked past all of them as if the whole yard were a hallway he had been walking down all morning. He stopped in front of Cormac, my Lord Blackthorn, my Lady Steelborn. I am Magister Alaric, third chair of the Crown's Registry of Lens Lands. I have ridden from the registry vaults at Silvermoon these past 9 days. I bear a matter of urgent Crown business regarding this holding. Behind him, Malric had gone very still. Speak it, Cormac's voice steady. With respect, my lord, this concerns all present, including Lord Vane. It is best said with all parties before me, and with a witness of station to hear it. I would ask that we go inside. There are documents to be examined. They went inside, all of them. Malric left 3 of his men-at-arms in the yard, brought 2 with him into the great hall. Sat where Cormac gestured, did not remove his gloves, did not accept the tea Freya offered without a word. Magister Alaric opened a leather case. He did not sit. He unrolled a large parchment on the kitchen table, weighted its corners, with 2 of the last silver coins from Cormac's cash box, and with the 2 silver coins from the bidding, which had been sitting on the mantel since the morning after the auction, which he had used because they were what was to hand. He looked at each of them in turn. 6 weeks passed. The Crown's Registry of Lands began an investigation into a series of suspect deed transfers in the Highlands. Prompted by a petition filed by one Alfaking Gareth Wintervale, Cormac's head lifted. Old Gareth. Gareth had petitioned the Crown. The petition concerned a parcel of land the petitioner claimed had been transferred fraudulently to Lord Malric Vane by way of a signature the petitioner did not remember making. In the course of our investigation, we examined several other deeds held by Lord Vane. including the deed of the Blackthorn holding, purportedly sold to Lord Vane by the widow of one Henrik Amsel. Deceased? Malric's jaw had set. Where is this going, Magister? It is going, my Lord Vane, to the fact that Henrik Amsel's widow was not, in point of law, the holder of the deed to this land. She never was. Because Henrik Amsel himself was not the holder of the deed to this land. Because this land was not, at any point in the last 20 winters, his to hold, Cormac did not move. Freya did not move. Alaric turned the parchment toward Cormac. This land was originally settled and granted, under the Crown's homestead charter of the 5th Ordinance, to one Thorin Steelborn, Master Smith of the Northland Guild. 20 winters passed. He established residence. He met the required improvement conditions across 3 summers. The Crown's registry sealed and issued him full title
3 winters after his arrival.
Freya had gone the color of ash. That was, her voice small. That was when I was 6 winters old. Yes, my lady. Your father held title to this land from that date forward. He intended, according to the letters filed with the registry, to return to the Northlands, to bring his family back to settle it with him. He did not survive that journey. He died 17 winters past of injuries sustained at his own forge in Winterhome, according to Crown records, and according to Northland Guild records. His only surviving heir, Alaric turned to her, was his daughter, Freya Steelborn. The silence was enormous. Cormac heard his own heartbeat in his ears. Freya's hand had come to her mouth. It means, my lady, that title to this holding passed to you upon your father's death. It has been held in your name in the registry vaults these 17 winters. Nowhere in that time was any legal transfer of title recorded to Henrik Amsel, or to his widow, or to any other party. The deed Lord Vane holds is a forgery, or, more precisely, it purports to convey a title that was never in the seller's possession to convey, which under Crown law renders the entire transaction void from the beginning. He turned to Malric. Lord Vane, your claim upon this land is dismissed. Effective immediately. Malric was on his feet. That is impossible. I have documentation. I have paid for that deed. In good faith. 250 gold, then you have been defrauded by whoever sold it to you, my lord. Which is a matter for your civil council, not for the Crown's registry. The land is not yours. It never was. You cannot. I have. Alaric's voice for the first time went hard. I represent the Crown's registry, my lord. My seal is upon this parchment. My findings are final unless overturned by the High Court at Silvermoon, which, should you attempt to pursue such a course, I am obliged to inform you that the same registry investigation has flagged the transfer of the Wintervale land, the transfer of 2 smaller parcels on the eastern ridge, and a 4th transfer involving a widow near Ironhold, all as fraudulent under the same pattern, and all bearing your name as beneficiary. Malric's face was the color of curdled milk. There will be an inquiry, my Lord Vane. There will very likely be criminal charges. I would advise you to attend to your affairs. Cormac had risen. He crossed to Freya, because she had begun to shake in her chair, silent, not weeping, not anything he had a name for. She was trembling the way a bell trembles after it has been struck. He put his hand on her shoulder. She reached up and covered his hand with hers. My father, her voice a whisper, my father owned this land. Yes, I have been living on my father's land. Yes, we have been fighting Malric for 3 moons over land that was already yours. She began to laugh, not a merry laugh, a wild, broken, disbelieving laugh. Because after 90 days of hammer and coal and threat and near ruin, the last piece fell into place, and it turned out to have been in her pocket the whole time. Cormac laughed too, because he could not help it. Because the whole of the 90 days broke in his chest at once and came out of him as laughter. And after a beat, Eldred, who had come in the door quietly during the reading, was laughing, and Ren, who had ridden up behind Eldred, was laughing. And even Alaric permitted himself a small dry registrar's smile. Malric was not laughing. I paid 250 gold for that deed. Freya turned to him, rose, 6 feet 2 inches of northern smith, soot still in the creases of her palms. Eyes now steady and dry, voice like iron pulled from the coals. You paid 250 gold for a piece of paper that meant nothing. And in doing so, you attempted to steal my father's land, my inheritance, my family's name in this valley. You broke my hammer haft. You bought off my coal supplier. You blackmailed a young father into spying on my hall by poisoning his mate. You sent a merchant to my table with a contract designed to strip me of the very tools of my trade. And this morning, you rode into my yard, one day early, in order to enjoy watching my mate lose his land. She took one step toward him. You will pay damages, 200 gold pieces, for every hammer, for every night I could not sleep, for every threat you made against a woman who never in her life did you a moment of wrong. And you will pay it before you leave this yard, or the magister here will begin the criminal inquiry today. Not next moon. Today, Malric's face was a study, rage, disbelief, calculation, the mathematics of what an open crown inquiry would do to the rest of his holdings. He reached inside his cloak, drew out a leather purse, counted the coins with hands that shook a little. 200 gold. He set them down on the kitchen table, beside the 2 silver coins, holding down the corners of the parchment. There, Freya answered. Malric turned, went to the door, paused, because a man like Malric could not walk out of a room without one last try. You will not always have crown magisters riding to your yard, Blackthorn. Winters are long in these hills. Cormac stepped between him and Freya. Speak one more word in my hall in her direction, Vane, and I will forget I am an alfaking of the crown's peace. And I will remember that at Ravenfield I killed 6 men with my own hands, and never lost a night of sleep over any of them. Malric left. The men-at-arms mounted. The whole party rode down the ridge road, the gray light of noon settling over the yard. Freya sat down on the edge of the table because her legs would no longer hold her. Cormac knelt in front of her. Breathe. I am. Slower. I am trying. You are the holder of this land. I am the holder of this land. You have been the holder of this land since you were a girl of 9 winters. I have been. Say it again. I have been the holder of this land. She looked at him, her eyes wet now. Cormac. Yes, my father. He tried to bring me here. He was building a home for me, and he died before he could, and I never knew. I have lived my whole life not knowing. He built it, and you found it, and you saved it. You paid for it in your own sweat. That is a thing your father would have known. He would have. She put her arms around his neck. The rest of it happened in a kind of dream. Alaric filed the papers, registered the title formally in Freya's name, registered Cormac by mating law as her mate of record and joint title holder pending her seal, took his leave with the same crisp registrar's bow he had brought with him, rode south toward Silvermoon in the fading afternoon. So did Wren. So did old Gareth, who had walked over the ridge as soon as he heard hoof-beats going the other way. Gareth said little, only sat by the fire with his cap in his hands, and shook his head every few minutes, as though he had won something at cards he had not known he had bought a stake in. Finn Hollowbrook came that evening, his mate Isolde on his arm. Thin still, walking with a stick, but walking alive. She looked at Freya, and then she came across the room and took Freya's hand in both of her hands and held it a long time without speaking, which was the only way the night could have started. The valley came the next day, the day after that too, not for a barn raising this time. For a festival, the White Pine Yard filled with people. Freya's forge, still half ruined under the collapsed roof, was decorated with wildflowers by a group of children who had never seen the woman who worked there but had heard their fathers speak her name at the supper table. Someone brought a spitted lamb. Someone brought 2 barrels of small beer. Eldred brought the fiddle. Wren brought the drum. Rowan Ashwood, who had spent 40 days working alongside Cormac and Freya, brought his younger brother's whistle and played it badly, which made the children laugh. Cormac and Freya danced again, better this time, because they had had 90 days of practice at holding on to each other. The moon rose full above the frost peaks. Cormac took Freya's hand and led her a little apart from the fires, to the top of the small rise where the old lookout stone sat, where his father had once told him he could see the whole of the blackthorn holding from that stone. where his father was buried in a plain grave 3 paces as stood. He drew out a small folded cloth, unwrapped it, 2 silver coins. He held them in his palm. She looked. Her breath caught. You kept them. I have kept them these 90 days. On the mantle, where I could see them, because I did not want to forget what they had bought me. They bought me at auction. For nothing, they bought me the whole of everything I have. Everything I am. Freya Steelborn, whatever this land is worth, whatever the white pine forest is worth, whatever the forge and the herd we will rebuild and the winters we have left are worth. All of it I own by way of these 2 coins, not because I was clever, not because I was rich, because the woman on that platform looked at me and did not look away. And I set 2 silver down on a table and paid for the finest thing that has ever been mine. He closed her hand around the coins. Take my vow, not by law of the registry, not by the auction hall's paper. Take it by our own words, under this moon, before your father's stone, in front of every person down in that yard. Say the words to me, and let me say them to you. She was crying, nodding. She could not speak. She nodded. They said the vows that night, under the full moon, in the yard of Blackthorn Hall, with 50 of the valley's people ringing them, and Eldred the Grey standing in the position of the officiating elder, as was the old northern custom. Cormac took Freya's braid in his hand and set his forehead against hers and made his mate mark upon her shoulder, and she made hers upon his throat, above the collarbone, where a mate mark shows to the world, where every man Malric Vane owed a debt to would see it. The next time Cormac rode into Ironhold, Freya's hand did not shake. Not once, Cormac's did. 2 winters passed. The forge was rebuilt, better than before, stone throughout. A copper flue. A roof pitched steep enough that no snow would sit on it, and no chimney would settle wrong under a decade of freeze and thaw. Freya took on 2 apprentices, a girl of 13 winters from the Wintervale seas, Stedding Penning, who had come to Cormac in the yard and said she wanted to learn to smith and would sleep in the barn if she had to. Freya had put her in the smallest guest chamber and set her to bellows work the following dawn. The other was a boy of 11 from Finn Hollowbrook's holding. Finn's wife's youngest brother sent up the mountain to learn a trade because Finn had insisted. The herd came back, not all at once. 15 head first, 10 more the second spring. Eldred's herd stock, wren's culls, old Gareth's yearlings, which he refused any coin for. By the end of the second summer, the pens held 32 head again, not 38. But the difference no longer mattered, because there was a fresh calf coming in the last of the mothers, and the forge earnings ran the accounts now. Not the herd, Malric Vane was gone. The Crown's inquiry had returned 4 separate charges against him for fraudulent conveyance. He had settled 2 out of court, lost the 3rd at a high court hearing at Silvermoon, fled the 4th, was last heard of in a coastal city in the west running a shipping concern under a name that was not his own. He never returned to the Highlands. His men-at-arms scattered. 1 took work on Wren's holding. 1 returned to his home village. The other 3 drifted south into the Crown's own service, where Cormac hoped, without much conviction, that they would find better lords. Old Gareth got his land back. All of it. Acklet returned in the summer of the 2nd year, with a fresh parchment and a crown seal. He handed it to Gareth in the yard at Blackthorn, on his way through to the eastern reaches. Gareth put the parchment down on the same kitchen table where the fraud had been undone. And he wept, because he had lived so long thinking he would die a landless man. And now he would not. He walked home that afternoon with his cap in his hand and did not stop grinning the whole way. Or so Rowan Ashwood said. Rowan walked him home. Because it seemed a fitting escort, Finn Hollowbrook served the Blackthorn Hall as its steward. Cormac had asked him at the end of the first winter, because the holding needed a man who kept ledgers. And because Finn had proven, over 2 seasons of working the far pastures and mending fences and asking to be given the hardest jobs, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life earning the mercy he had been given. He had earned it. Cormac told him so plainly one evening at the summer table. Finn had not spoken, only nodded. His mate Isolde had at the same table laid a hand on Cormac's wrist. And she had said, in a voice that was steady now and full where it had once been thin, "You gave me my life back." All of it. And Cormac had said, "Ren gave you your life back. I only ordered the medicine sent." And Isolde had shaken her head and answered, "You ordered a man to have a wife. That is the greater gift." That was one of the sentences Cormac Blackthorn would carry to his grave. 2 years after the auction, Freya bore a daughter. They named her Hope Steelborn Blackthorn, because Hope had been the first horseshoe her mother had made in the yard at Blackthorn, because Hope had been what Cormac had said when he saw that horseshoe, because Hope had been the whole of what had bought them everything they now had. The child had her mother's height. Even in the cradle, Freya laughed and said the girl would top 6 feet by 12 winters old. Cormac said he would raise her to plant her feet like a woman who had never bent under a laugh, because he wanted her to hear the word tall and to think of it as an inheritance rather than a punishment. 2 silver coins now sat in a small wooden box on the mantel of the great hall. Freya had made the box herself from a piece of the white pine that had come out of the forest the winter after the wedding. Cormac had carved the lid. He was not a good carver, but he had carved it anyway. 6 clumsy letters that spelled a phrase in the old northern tongue, "Best investment ever made," which was a sentence Cormac Blackthorn had said aloud to himself in the smithy yard 111 days after the auction, and had said aloud again on the night Hope was born, and which he intended to say every year on the anniversary of the auction for as many years as the Moon Mother granted him. Neighbors called the whole story the bargain at Ironhold, because that is how it entered the songs Eldred the Grey composed in the last winters of his long life. Eldred did not survive to see Hope's 5th winter. He died in his sleep, in his own hall, an old man honored and fed and read to by his own grandchildren. Cormac carried the coffin at the front, as was right, because Eldred had carried him out of Ravenfield when he could not stand, and a debt of that kind was paid with one's own shoulder at the end. Or it was not paid at all. He said the words at Eldred's stone. He said them in front of the whole valley. He said, "No Alfaking is only the strongest man in the pack. He is also the man who is carried when he cannot walk, and who carries others when their legs give out. Eldred the Grey carried me. Now I carry him." That was Cormac Blackthorn at 43 winters old, and the story would go on from there. As stories do, children born, winters weathered, fences mended, beasts calved, iron rung on iron in a smithy that had heard the sound now for a full generation. But the 2 silver coins stayed on the mantel, and every year on the day of the auction, Cormac lifted the box down, and he set the coins in Freya's palm, and she set them back in his, and they said, one to the other, the same words, in front of Hope, in front of the apprentices, in front of whoever happened to be in the hall that day. "Best investment ever made. Best investment ever made," which is a fine place to leave a story. But it is not a fine place to leave a lesson, because stories are for warming the heart, and lessons are for warming the road ahead. So permit me a moment before we let the fire go down, because there is something in this story that any man past the middle of his life will recognize. Something about the difference between winning and holding your ground, between money and worth, between the way the world will price you at auction and the way you will be priced by the one person who ever really looked at you. Have you ever been in a room and been priced by strangers? Most of us have, not in an auction hall, not with a hammer coming down, but we have been priced by employers, by in-laws, by our own fathers, sometimes in ways that took decades to name, by friends who moved up the ladder faster, by the number in the account, by the health of the body, by the model of the truck sitting in the driveway. We have all at some point in our lives been the one on that platform, and we have heard the silence when the number was too low, and we have felt the ground tilt when it seemed no one at all would bid. Cormac Blackthorn bid 2 silver coins, because he had 2 silver coins, because he had nothing else in the world. And the lesson is not that his 2 silver coins were secretly magic, or that Freya was secretly a princess, or that the land was secretly hers. The lesson is not the ending. The lesson is the moment before the ending. The lesson is the moment when a man with 2 coins in his pocket decided he would rather spend them badly than not spend them at all, because a man who saves everything for the winter that might come sometimes finds that the winter came anyway, and he was hungry next to a full sack of flour. Not because the flour was not enough, but because he had been afraid to open it, afraid to spend it, afraid to bet it on anything. Cormac bet. He bet the last of what he had on a woman he did not know, because he saw her keep her feet when everyone else had told her to sit down. And she bet the whole of the second half of her life on a man who had bought her at the lowest price in the history of the auction hall, because he had looked at her and used a word that no one had ever used about her before. He had said she had not folded. And that had been enough. That is the whole of it, brothers. There will be seasons in your life when you have 2 silver coins in your pocket and a voice in your head telling you to hold on to them. Because winter is coming. Because you are too old to take chances. Because you have been burned. Because your first wife left you. Because your father died disappointed in you. Because your knees hurt. Because your best friend from the service is somewhere you have not spoken to in 20 years, and you never got to say the thing you meant to say to him. Hold the coins if you must. Nobody will fault you. Life has taught you to hold them. But listen to me now. Because I am telling you the whole point of Cormac Blackthorn's story, and I do not want you to miss it in the dust of a fine ending. Sometimes the best 2 silver coins you will ever spend are the ones you were saving for something safer. Sometimes the woman on the platform is your last chance. Sometimes the son you have not spoken to in 11 years is your last chance. Sometimes the letter you have been meaning to write to the old brother you served with is your last chance. Sometimes the sentence, "I love you," said 30 years too late, is still not too late. Because 30 years is not too late. 60 years is not too late. Not until they close the box over you is it too late. Not 1 hour before that. Because holding your ground is the only true wealth. Cormac saw it in her. She saw it in him. And they built the rest of a life on that seeing. You have held your ground. You are still here. If you are hearing this, you are still here. That is a fact I will fight any man over. You are still here. And there is somebody on a platform, somewhere in your life, waiting. Perhaps it is your own reflection in the shaving mirror. Perhaps it is a son. Perhaps it is a daughter. Perhaps it is the shape of a life you thought was over and has one more chapter in it if you are willing to bid. Bid the 2 coins. Say the thing. Take the trip. Ask the forgiveness. Offer the forgiveness. Open the door, cross the yard, climb the stairs, pick up the telephone, write the letter, sit down at the table, say I am sorry, say I love you. Say I have been afraid for 30 years, and I do not want to be afraid any longer. Bid. The auction hall is still open. You still have coins in your pocket. Somebody is on that platform. Now, I would like to ask you something. Because a story like this one does no good if it sits alone in the dark after the fire goes down. If you have ever been on a platform, if you have ever heard a laughing hall go silent, if you have ever spent your last 2 silver coins on something the whole world called a bad bet, or if you know somebody who did, tell us. In the comments below this story, write it down. 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, 1 page. Whatever you have in you, tell us who bid on you when nobody else would. Or tell us who you bid on. Or tell us the person you never bid on and wish you had. Because I promise you, there is a man somewhere in the audience for this story tonight. A brother, a father, a widower, a grandfather, a quiet man in a quiet house, sitting alone at his kitchen table right now, wondering if any voice is going to bid on him. Your comment might be his voice, the lowest bid in the whole of the auction hall. Saved a life once. It could save another tonight. May the Moon Mother keep your hearth. May your fire never fall to ash. And may every man among you who has ever been afraid to spend his last 2 silver coins find the courage to spend them well. Best investment ever made. Best investment ever made.